All right, so today I want to talk to you about ADA compliance for your auto repair shop's website. Now, before we get started, I just want to say I am not an attorney. To be sure that you are fully compliant, you want to consult with your attorney about this. So understand that before we get started. First, let's talk about what is ADA compliance. ADA compliance, when it comes to your website specifically, is about creating a website that is accessible to all. You know, people who have visual impairments, hearing impairments, physical impairments, that they can navigate through your website and consume that information just like anyone else can. So normally when we think about ADA compliance, we're thinking about things like ramps that go into our building or handrails in our restrooms and those sorts of things. Well, it's the same idea. It all falls under Title III ADA compliance, but this is going to be specific to your website and even your mobile apps in some cases. So why does ADA compliance matter? Well, lawsuits have been on the rise. So that is one big thing for the small business owner to understand, is that if you're not compliant, that you could find yourself the victim of a lawsuit. Now, there is this misconception out there that ADA compliance for websites is specific to government entities. Well, in 2019, Domino's Pizza they'd had a lawsuit against them about their website and their mobile app. And they went to the Court of Appeals and tried to have it appealed, and the Court of Appeals ruled that they were absolutely liable. And at that point, it gave a lot of credibility to these lawsuits that have been happening when it comes to private businesses being sued over ADA compliance issues for their website, their app, their digital assets. So the other thing just to keep in mind, though, is it's really the right thing to do. 1 in 5 people in the United States have some kind of a disability. 8.1 million Americans are visually impaired. 7.6 million Americans have difficulty hearing. 19.9 million Americans have mobility issues that would hinder access to a non-compliant website. And the United Nations and just most in general believe that having access to the internet is a fundamental God-given right. So who benefits from ADA compliant websites? Well, blind people who are using screen readers, visually impaired people. You know, it's not just those who can't see at all, but people who are colorblind may have a hard time navigating a website. People that just can't see as well as others may not be able to read small fonts or, you know, fonts with thin lettering and light colors. And then there's also people who would have a physical impairment that would keep them from being able to handle a mouse, and they need to be able to navigate through your website using a keyboard. So a lot of times when we're talking about auto repair, people are saying, well, if somebody is blind, they can't drive a car to my shop anyway. But it's important to understand that ADA compliance has a lot more to do with just people that cannot see at all. You know, hearing impaired people, if you've got videos on your website, they should be able to consume that content as well. You know, and we're going to talk about that. So what makes a website ADA compliant? Well, there are over 100 rules for making a website ADA compliant. We're going to talk about some of the most important things that you need to do, and we're going to talk about some of the things that are just important to do. And then there's a whole host of things that we're not going to talk about. Making your website 100% ADA compliant, it may not be reasonable to even be able to do it. But if you show the best intentions of creating a website that is as ADA compliant as you can make it, then you're probably going to be just fine and not be victim of a lawsuit. However, you know, if somebody is just out to get a lawsuit against somebody, there's no telling what it is that they may sue you for. So the most important things when it comes to being ADA compliant is going to be things like skip navigation links, alt text on your images, proper heading structure, and text labels on form fields. So let's talk about each of those and, you know, how that helps a website to be navigable by all users. So a skip nav function, this is something that unless you put yourself in the shoes of a blind person who is sitting there using a screen reader to read a website, that you would never even think that you might need. And a skip nav function is just that. It allows the person to skip the navigation. Because when they're using a screen reader to read through a website, they're using the tab button. They're using the right and left arrow keys, the up and down keys, the enter button. They're using these things to navigate through the website. And typically the way that you're going to do that is you're going to hit the tab button, and it's going to start at the very top left of the page. And as you hit tab, it's going to read everything that's there. So if you've got a website that has a navigation and it's like home, about us, services, contact us, then when they hit that tab key, they'll be on the home page. Now it will tell them about us, and they'll hit the tab key again, and it will tell them that there's a services link. And then if there's a drop down there, it will read each one of those to them, and they have to keep hitting the tab key to read each one of those navigation elements, and then they'll go back to the main navigation once they get to the bottom of that drop down list. So they have to go through home, about us, services, all of the things that you have listed under services. Then they'll find their way to the contact us, depending on how your navigation is laid out. And if you have a simple 3 or 4 page website, it's not that big of a deal. But if you've got a website that has a lot of navigation elements, then when they're going from one page to another, they have to keep hitting that tab key to get down to the main content in the website. And it's just not a good user experience. So that skip nav is the very top left thing, and it will read out to them, that it's a skip navigation element. They hit tab, and it takes them past the entire navigation to the first heading in the content on the page. So that is a very helpful thing to someone who is using a screen reader to read through a website. The next thing that we're going to talk about is your image alt text. Now, image alt text is just text that describes the image, so that if a visually impaired person is reading the website with a screen reader, when they come to an image, that image will get described to them. Now, what image alt text is improperly but more commonly used for is for search engine optimization purposes. So what a lot of people will do for their image alt text, if they put any at all, they'll put something like Atlanta, Georgia auto repair. Well, this might be a picture of a family driving their car on a road trip, having a great time, but the image alt text says Atlanta, Georgia auto repair. It doesn't describe the image. We want, in a perfect world, for that image alt text to serve both purposes. We want for it to describe the image to the person that's looking at the website through a screen reader, and to also work for us for search engine optimization purposes. So a proper way to describe that would be something like family driving their car on a road trip needing auto repair in Atlanta, Georgia. And this would serve both purposes. It's going to tell the person what it's an image of, but it's also going to get your search terms in there as well for Google to be able to pick up on and to hopefully place you higher. So think about that when you go through your website. This is one of the easiest things to fix is your image alt text. You probably don't have it at all. If you do, it's probably not descriptive of the images. You want to go in there, you want to put an image alt text that actually describes the image, but also has your key terms, your search terms in it as well. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is heading structure. Your heading structure is like the outline of the content that's on your website. If you think about an outline from back when you were at school, you would have the title of the page, then you would have like subheadings, and it's kind of the same thing on a website, and it helps somebody when they're reading through the website to not have to read every bit of content that's on the page, but to be able to skip to the sections that they want. So the way that headings on a website work is you have H1s, H2s, H3s, and they typically will go down through about H6. They can go further, but normally they don't. And your H1 heading is going to be the main, like the overall topic of the page. So you might have a page on your website that is about maintenance. And then that, so, you know, in the H1 of your page, it's going to say maintenance or vehicle maintenance or something like that. And it's going to have a little bit of information underneath that. Then you're going to have another heading on the page that's going to be a little bit less important than that H1 heading. That's going to be your H2. And that might be something like Asian car, or maintenance for Asian cars. And then you would have some information under that. And then you might have another H2 a little bit further down that would be maintenance for European cars and some information under that. Then you can go further and have like your H3 headings. So under your maintenance for European cars, you might have an H3 that is a heading that is Mercedes-Benz A service. And then a heading under that that is about BMW services. So basically what it does is it sets a hierarchy of content so that when somebody is on the website and they are reading it with a screen reader, they don't have to read every word on the page. Just like us who are able to look at the website and visually see it, we see those headings and we're able to go right to the information that we want and read that. The proper heading structure allows a person who's reading with a screen reader to do the same exact thing. So this is a very important element on the website. The next thing that is super important is going to be text label on form fields. Now this is also going to be the most difficult thing to do on your website, but to allow people who are visually impaired to fill out a form on a website, you're going to want to have this right. So here we're going to look at 4 different options. If we look at option 1, which is to the far left, we can see that the form fields, they don't actually have labels on them. They have text inside of the form field that as soon as you would click in there, that text would go away and you would be able to type in your text. Now, for someone who can see perfectly fine, there's nothing at all wrong with this method because we're able to see, oh, well, this one where it says Jason Ross, that they're wanting a full name there, so I can type in my full name. And then where it's got this email address in here, I'm supposed to type in my email address. But if a person is reading this with a screen reader, it's not going to read that text to them that's inside of that field. So this form on this website would be basically useless to someone who is reading it with a screen reader. Now option 2 is a little bit better because it does have field labels on it. We can see that it says name, email address, password, and confirm password. But if we look at it down at the bottom, we can see that the bottom form fields have been highlighted in red. And what this means is that there was some kind of an error when you put in your password. So that's fine and good for someone who, who can see just fine, but think about that visually impaired person or the colorblind person who's reading this and they can't see red very well. Well, you're sitting here trying to fill out this form and it's not working for them because there's a problem with the password that they're putting in, but they don't know this because they can't differentiate the red from the black on the page. So this is a poor way to do it. Option 3, that's a little bit better because now where we have an issue with our form, it's at least got the little circle with the exclamation point. So that's going to be okay for that person who is colorblind, but it's not going to work very well for the person who can't see at all. Option number 4 is your best option. That gives you all of the pieces that you need because if you look at it, not only has it turned the form field red and it's put the exclamation point in place, but it's got the words there to say your password is too short. And this can be read by the screen reader so that the person can come back in and put a longer, more secure password in place. So the problem here is that most form modules that you put on a website are not going to have this functionality built into them. So you're going to want to find that perfect form module that's going to have this ability so that when someone is reading with a screen reader, they can fill out your forms just like anyone else who is visiting your website. So those are the things that are the most important things to have done on your website. But again, as we talked, there's over 100 different rules for ADA compliance. So now let's talk about some of the things that, whereas they may not be as important as what we just talked about, they're still very important. So let's start off, all right, we've got contrasting colors, clear large fonts, descriptive link text, and subtitles on video. So on contrasting colors, if you look at this slide here, a lot of designers, when they are designing a website, they will do something like they'll put a light gray text on top of a darker gray background because it looks good. And You know, the problem there is that if someone can't see very well, or if they're colorblind, it's going to be incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for them to be able to read this text. You know, as we go down, like the blue on blue is very hard to read, but as we get to the bottom, the black on white or the yellow on black, these are very easy to read because they're contrasting colors. Now, with contrast, this is something that's measurable. There are tools that you can use online, and it will, there are certain ratios that you have to follow that designers will understand how these ratios work. And the ratio is also dependent on the size of the text. When you get into larger text, it only needs to be about 3.0 to 1, whereas you get into smaller text, which I believe is defined as a 16 point or smaller, then you have to have at least a 4.25 to 1 ratio on your colors. So again, that doesn't make sense talking ratios on colors if you're not a designer, but designers will understand this, and there's tools that they can use to make sure that the text that they're using, that the colors contrast enough. And then if you look over on the right-hand side of this slide, another thing that can be a problem is when you put text over an image, which we do that a lot in design, but especially when we get into the smaller text. If we have white text, for example, and there's parts of that image where the background behind that text is white, or at least a light color, that can also make it very difficult to read. So you want to be careful about doing that as well. All right, so moving on from color contrast, we also want to have clear, large fonts in place. If you take a look at these two fonts that I've got on this slide, the top one is it's a font that has got a very thin, it's a very thin font. The line spacing is not much, and also we've got a light color here. So basically what we've done is created the perfect storm to give you the example that this is very difficult to read. But when we get to the bottom, we've got a very natural font like a Open Sans. We've got some good line spacing. We've got some, we're using a larger font and a little bit thicker font. This is going to be very easy to read. So, whereas many people may be able to read that top one just fine, there's going to be a lot who cannot. So you want to think about that when you're using typography on your website, to make sure that you're using clear, large fonts. And then descriptive link text. A lot of times on websites we will use link text like click here or learn more. And these are very poor it creates for a very poor user experience for someone who is reading your website through a screen reader, because they have to remember what the text was ahead of this link so that they know, well, what am I clicking here for, or what am I going to click and learn more about? So if they don't remember that, then they have to go back and listen to it again and then come back and click on that link if it's something that they want to click or learn more about. The better way to do this is to use descriptive link text, something like click here to schedule service or learn more about our warranty. The link itself is telling them exactly what they're clicking for and what it is that they're going to find when they get on the other side of that link. So having descriptive link text is very important. And then the last thing of the importance would be to have subtitles on video. If someone is hearing impaired, for them to be able to consume your video just like anyone else would is going to be really important. And you'll say, well, if I put it on YouTube, YouTube's going to automatically do closed captioning for me. And it will. But it's not very accurate. I say that, sometimes it can be pretty accurate, but if somebody's got an accent, or if there was something they said that was kind of a, not a more traditional word, then the closed captioning that is done through artificial intelligence may not have picked up on exactly what it was that they said. And it gives a poor user experience. Also, when you do closed captioning yourself, you can use larger fonts. You can make it easier to read. You can make sure that exactly what you said is exactly what is being displayed on that video for someone to read. And this is beyond just something for people who are hearing impaired. You think about how many times you will listen to a video on social media, while you're scrolling on Facebook, without turning the audio on. I know I do it all the time, and studies have shown that most people actually watch videos with the sound off. So it just gives a better user experience for all when you give those subtitles. There are tools like this capwing.com. The link is right there on the video, where you can go do this for free. So it's not a difficult process. So then, once we get past these most important things and these important things, we've got all of these other rules. What are they? Well, that's something that you just have to dig into if you really want to do that. But the fact is if you get those most important and those important in place, you're gonna be pretty good, because the lawsuits that are happening for the websites that they just don't meet ADA compliance at all. The truth is if you get the most important things in place, then you're going to create a user experience that at least somebody can get through. It may not be the best user experience, but it's at least usable to them, whereas without them it would not be usable at all. So where do you start? Well, if you go to WebAIM or wave.webaim.org, this is a tool where you can put in your website's URL, and it will show you what the problems are on your website that you can work your way through and start fixing them. It's a free tool, it costs nothing. You just go to it and you drop your website URL in, and it will show you these errors and alerts. So very easy tool to use. And the important thing is, start with the easy stuff. Go in there, edit your image alt text, put proper heading structure in place. Make your links descriptive. Put subtitles on your videos. These things are super easy to do, and someone who's just looking for a quick, easy lawsuit, when they see that these things are in place, they're going to move on to the next website to find the person that hasn't done anything at all to make their website compliant. So start with the easy stuff and then move on from there. Again, your forms are going to be the most difficult thing that you're going to do on the website. So start with the other things first, because it's just a quick, easy win for you, and it's going to make for a better user experience. And then you can move on to the harder things like making the forms ADA compliant. And also understand that ADA compliance, it's going to be an ongoing project for most, because every time that you put new content on your website, new pictures, a new form, as rules change, as technologies change, your website that used to be ADA compliant may not still be ADA compliant. So you want to audit your website probably at least once a year or so. Make sure that you're maintaining compliance, and just do the absolute best that you can. So if you've got any questions, this video is going to be on YouTube. It'll be on our website also. Feel free to reach out to us. Send us a message. Put a comment on YouTube. Ask us the questions. We'll do our best to help you. And I hope that this was helpful. And good luck in making your website the best user experience that you can for everyone.